For a reason.
For all those who are able, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us at this special meeting of the Attleboro School Committee and the Attleboro City Council. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. At this time, I would like to call up the Mayor of Attleboro, Kevin Dumas, and the Superintendent of Schools, David Sawyer, for some welcoming remarks.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming here to Attleboro High School this evening for this joint meeting between the Attleboro City Council and the Attleboro School Committee. We have faculty, staff, and honored guests and new members of the public who are with us here tonight. And thank you so much for taking interest in this major project that we're embarking on in order to make sure for our students that we have the proper facility to be able to initiate the learning that has to happen in a 21st century education. So we really appreciate the fact that you're here for your interest and to be able to learn more about the process of which leads us here today in working with the Massachusetts School Building Authority and the process that we have to go to get to the options that they make us go through and evaluate. And we've done that through the work of the School Building Committee with the Municipal Building Commission, along with our partners that we've hired as part of that process, Castle Booz and Skanska, and they're going to be leading us with a discussion here this evening and to be able to walk us through this process. But we thank you very much for your interest in education here in Attleboro and certainly for the future of our youth. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to join the Mayor in welcoming everyone here today. Thank you, Mayor, for coming. I'd like to thank the Municipal Council and the School Committee. It's great to see so many educators from the Attleboro Public Schools here this evening. And I especially want to welcome all of our families in the Attleboro Public Schools and other Attleboro community members, as you are the owners of this project, and it is exciting to see you come out to show your support and interest in this project. We're here tonight to learn about a serious challenge facing the city and discuss our options. This now maturing 21st century poses two separate but intertwined problems for Attleboro High School. The school was designed for an educational system that no longer is effective at meeting the needs of students. Education has come a long way since 1962. We now educate all of our students. I want to remind you that back when the building was built, we didn't have the federal law, IDEA, that ensures that all students with disabilities are educated. Before that, only 1 in 5 was educated. On top of that, we make sure that everybody graduates. We pay close attention to our graduation rates, and we make sure the students are meeting standards. You know, this is the age of educational accountability. And so all of these things were not imaginable back in 1962. I'd also like to point out that the realities of the 21st century are beginning to disrupt our assumptions as they change the economy and the world that the students we are educating are going to enter into. You know, quite frankly, robots and algorithms are soon going to automate as much as 50% of the jobs that the economy now holds. It's hard to understand how we should educate students if we don't even really know what the world is going to look like when they enter the workforce. So for these reasons, our educational system needs to be overhauled. At the same time, the building itself has outlived any reasonable expectations for its lifespan. The building itself predates ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and has endured over a half-century of updates to codes. You know, novel ideas like fire protection. You know, we don't have a sprinkler system here at the schools. Also, the building was built with instructional spaces and infrastructure that did not anticipate the digital revolution, and therefore our classrooms cannot support 21st century learning. And of greatest concern for us, the mechanical and environmental systems in this building are exhausted and require replacement. So these two issues, the educational programming within the building and the building itself, are separate but parallel. Each must be addressed regardless of the other. You can't fix one and not worry about the other. We must overhaul our educational programming to better prepare students, and we must remediate this tired facility which is approaching failure. And so now there's much room for discussion about the best way to educate our children. And tonight we hope we will see that there are important decisions that must be made about how to address the impending problems with this facility. But it is important to acknowledge that whether or not to have a school is not a matter that we can debate. We must educate our children, and a safe and functioning building is a prerequisite of this aim. As the Chief Educational Officer for the City of Attleboro, I have a responsibility to inform you all that one way or another, the mounting needs of this facility will become an inescapable problem for all of us in the immediate future. Hopefully tonight's presentation and discussion can assist in developing a community consensus as to the best course of action for our city and the students that are depending on us. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome Marianne Williams, a representative from Skanska.
Good evening. Can people hear me? Okay. I'd like to introduce my colleague here, Dale Caldwell with Skanska, and we're also going to be joined with Joe Milani from Castle Booze and also Mark Schatz from Schwartz Silver. They'll be joining us in the presentation as we proceed through it. So I have to put my glasses on or I won't be able to read anything here. Closer. Okay, thank you. So what we wanted to talk about tonight was to give you a higher level overview of the Mass School Building Authority process, talk about the timeline and what we've gone through so far, and how that's affected some of the decisions to date, and also talk about the existing conditions at Attleboro High School and community involvement. And lastly, we want to hear from you. We've been learning from you for over several months and would like to continue to do that. So what you see up on the screen behind me is the timeline and milestones with the Mass School Building Authority. You'll see when you come down to the third line that we've actually made a lot of progress here. We're in Module 3. We're at the point where it's highlighted in red where we've developed some cost-effective models and options for the school. And as you can see, though, we also have a long way to go here in the process. We've been holding public meetings, actually since last January. You can see the meetings listed here with the members of the School Building Committee. Talk a little bit about the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Prior to the feasibility study, the Mass School Building Authority requires the district to establish design enrollment. And so that's something where they look at the historical numbers of the past 10 years, and they also look at the projections going forward 10 years, and they try to extrapolate from that what the trends are in terms of number of students that we should build or design the school around. Currently, there's 1,649 students participating in the high school, and the design enrollment is for 1,725, which is to take into consideration increases in the student population over time. So when you look at reimbursement from the Mass School Building Authority, they start with a base rate of 31%, and then they start looking at community factors based on income, poverty wealth factors, and community poverty factors. So at this point in time, the base reimbursement rate for Attleboro is 60.57% for eligible costs. And what that means is there are costs that are ineligible, so simply you couldn't say, you know, whatever our total project cost is, we're going to receive 60% reimbursement. It's going to be some variation of that based on the options selected. And usually, we have found in many communities that that rate could be as much as 10% less. So there are incentive points that are available as part of the program. If you, some that are relevant really to Attleboro is, for example, if you develop a highly efficient green school model, you can receive up to 2 points, and we believe this would be easily achievable in some of the new options or renovation options. They also look at best practices for maintenance, and I have to say this is, I think, one of the cleanest schools I've ever been in, and you know, the need for the change with the school has nothing to do with, the need for improvements here has nothing to do with lack of care of the school. It really has to do with the age of the building and that systems are beyond their useful life. Also, other incentive points available are for CM at risk, which is a public procurement form of whether you bring the contractor on board early into the process before the project is designed. The costs that are categorically ineligible, you'll see in this slide, has to do with like financing costs, legal fees, swimming pools, any site costs that exceed 8% of the overall direct costs for construction. If you need temporary classrooms, modular classrooms, those are the types of things that the Mass School Building Authority does not participate in. But one thing to point out is that construction costs are capped at $312 a square foot. And that's not to say that they believe, oh, that's how much a building should cost. It's basically, this is a grant program. The state is trying to spread the money around through all of the communities. There's 1,850 schools, K through 12 schools in Massachusetts, and a lot of them in great need. So the importance here is to understand that the state recognizes that in no way covers the cost of the project or program, but it's certainly something to be appreciated because the community is not left funding the cost 100% on their own. So here you'll see a diagram about educational programming and visioning. This is a process that we went through where we actually engaged 55 to 60 people in the community. We had people from fire, police, we had teachers, students. It was a good mix where we were able to get really good feedback. And essentially what visioning is really talking about what works with the school, what are the best practices, what could we do to improve how those practices happen in the building. And it's those ideas that help inform what they call an educational program. And the educational program that was developed by the educational leadership in the school department was developed with the input from this visioning and feedback from a lot of folks in the community. And then it was presented to the school committee and subsequently approved. So the reason why we talk about that is that when we really look at what is it we're trying to do with our school and to improve it, it's really about saying, you know, with these mini conversations, we're able to understand what's important specifically to your school, to your community, and that becomes what they call the basis of design going forward. So it's the blueprint about what we need to take care of and how spaces should be designed in the adjacencies. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleague here, Joe, and he's going to speak to you about existing conditions in the high school.
Good evening. One of our tasks as part of this study was to review the existing systems and conditions of the high school building. What we're showing tonight is an extremely abbreviated form of what we have in our report. That is extensive, several pages, many chapters, reviewed by several consultants, reviewing all the systems in the building. The original building was built around 1960, with a major addition in 1970, and over the past 50 or so years, the floors have been polished and the equipment's been maintained, but despite these efforts, as Marianne said, systems and equipment will simply wear out and break down over time. This can be seen as you walk around the building. You'll see things like brick veneer that's cracking, mortar that's falling out, floors have worn through, floors have been cut open to access equipment below the slabs, paint on windows and doors has cracked and spalled off. Casework, you can see the finish on the casework is worn through and fallen off. You've got windows that are leaking, causing damage to walls, floors, and other finishes, and systems like mechanical systems that are actually part of the original building from 1960, boilers and heating equipment that is beyond its useful life. Some of the things you can't see as you walk around the building are actually the most expensive things to fix, like mechanical equipment that's beyond its useful life, that is antiquated, outdated, inefficient, heating pipes that are embedded in floors and walls. For example, in the A building, the original building built in 1960, heating ductwork and piping is embedded and buried below the slab on grade. Back then it was considered the thing to do. It saved a lot of space above the ceiling, made the building shorter, but it makes maintaining these systems extremely difficult and fixing these systems almost impossible and very costly. Most of the equipment, as Marianne mentioned, in the building is beyond its useful service life and is in need of replacement. The building was built in 1960 in accordance with the building codes at that time, but of course, because of technological innovations, scientific changes, tragic events, these codes change over time. And one way they've changed dramatically since 1960 is in regard to handicap accessibility. Most of the building today is not considered to be accessible based on today's standards. In fact, the building doesn't have a sprinkler system, but any new school built today would be required by code to have a sprinkler system. In fact, if you were to look at the building's assessed value, any renovation or addition that's done to this building that costs more than $10 million would require a full sprinkler system be installed and that the entire building be upgraded to be fully code compliant for handicap accessibility. Another thing that wasn't considered to be very important back when the building was built in 1960 was energy conservation. This is evidenced by the exterior brick walls, which have no insulation in them, exterior windows, which are single glazed glass. Not only does this waste a lot of energy, but it costs the city a lot of money every day to heat the school. I'm going to turn this over now to Mark Schatz from Schwartz Silver, our design partner, to talk about the designs that we've come up with as this phase of the building.
Good evening. Thank you, Joe. Our firm, Schwartz Silver, has been working with Joe's firm, Castle Booth, to develop a number of options for what should happen with the school. The school building committee has selected 6 options to take and submit to the MSBA in the first round of the concept design phase. And I'll go through the 6 options. The first one you see here is a repair-only option. And it's simply to take the existing building and to make repairs to it, to replace all of the heating and air conditioning systems, the electrical systems, the plumbing fixtures, to take off the brick and insulate the walls, to replace all the windows, all the things that the building really needs to be more efficient. But what it doesn't do is address any of the educational, any of the new educational program that we've spent a lot of time developing with the city here, that the superintendent talked about. So the other options that I'm going to show you now, the other 5 options are 2 renovations and 3 new buildings, and all of them try to deal with how to. Well, we felt there were a number of things that are really important. We thought, first of all, that any new high school or any renovated high school should have a new identity. and it should have a new identity for on Rathbun-Willard Drive with a new entrance. If you think about this school now, you could drive down Rathbun-Willard and you can't even see where the entrance is. It's hidden on the side. And so we thought it was really important that we make sure that you can see where the entrance is and you really understand this is a new high school building. We also thought it was important that it's very important that we meet the new educational program. And that includes dividing the classrooms up into 4 small learning communities that will each have their special focus. It also includes expanding the career technical education programs. And including that is developing some retail spaces for the certain career CTE programs that would be right in front, easily accessible to the public. We thought that the new high school should be very user-friendly for all of the people in Attleboro, so that you can go to the retail spaces up in front to go to the cosmetology shop to get your hair done, or to go and use the culinary restaurant, or to use the automotive services. But also, the new school should be easy to get to the gymnasium for basketball games, and to the auditorium for theater productions and meetings just like this. It should be easy for the public to be able to access the building. We also thought it was important that the new building be more compact. This building is incredibly spread out, and the walk from one end to the other, we thought, if we're going to change this building, we've got to make it more compact. So with those in mind, let's go through the options now. What I'm going to show you first is an idea for a renovation. We're calling it Option B. And what it really tries to do is build a new addition that will provide a new identity for the school. And it does it right up in the front here. You see this sort of curving addition in the front. And that addition contains 4 floors in the front with all of the classrooms, all the new classrooms for the building. And the idea is that you build all the new classrooms first, so that you can create swing space, so all the students can then move out of the rest of the building and into that and have a place to go while the rest of the building is renovated. So if we go to the floor plans of what that looks like, on the left is the ground floor plan, and the entrance is in the center. And to the right, or to the left, are we're calling them the retail spaces. So it's culinary arts, graphic design, cosmetology. To the right in green are the administrative offices for the principal and other things like that. Behind that is a brand new gymnasium. In yellow, it's about almost twice the size of the existing gymnasium. It can be divided into 4, so it provides for much better functioning than the existing gym does. And then across from that, a new auditorium space to replace this one. And everything is centered then around a new dining commons. We're calling it the dining commons in the center. Everything in this option sort of centers around that. You'll see that there's a common theme in all of the ideas. And then above that are 3 floors of classrooms. You see them here. And you see how they're sort of clustered in a cluster formation, 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters that represent the 4 small learning communities. So that becomes a sort of a common thing also that we carry on with. And this is the idea of what it would look like then. A 4-story building would be built in back, in the front, with an entrance in the center, right there. Behind it, the gymnasium, the dining commons, and the auditorium. And then a link goes back, and behind are all of the existing career technical education spaces that get renovated. So we preserve all of that, but we build all of this new. And this is built first, and then we phase the other portions of this to complete the project. let me show you the second option for renovation. This is a similar, there you see the view from the side with the classroom wing, auditorium, gymnasium, a new cafeteria that looks out into the courtyard, and the link back to the career technical spaces. A second renovation option, we're calling it option C, is a very similar idea, but it takes the four-story classroom wing and it wraps it around sort of the west end of the high school. It then sort of encompasses the main components of the new school, of the school building. And the floor plans of that are shown here, very similar to the other one. The orange spaces right next to the entrance are the retail spaces. To the left of the entrance are the principal's office, administrative spaces. You can see that the gymnasium and the auditorium are centered around a dining commons, which in this case has a different shape than the other one because it's defined by the arc of the classrooms. And then above it, you can see on the right, the arc of the classroom spaces, 4 stories. Again, the idea of clustering those classrooms to create small learning communities, and the idea being that you'd have classrooms with breakout space in the center. So the classes can really sort of spill out into the space in between, and that could be used for lectures or it could be used for group activities. Really something that we've talked about since the visiting session, how to make this a more interactive school building. And this is what this option will look like. See, in this case, that classroom wing is now wrapping around all of the functions of the sort of the main public functions of the school. And again, the CTE programs in existing portions of the building are renovated to provide for CTE spaces. Now, these two options both meet the educational program that the superintendent talked about. I think they meet it quite well, actually. The only problem is that because it's a renovation, but they're both renovations and additions, you have to do it in phases. So you build, in this case, you build this thing first, all the students move into it, but then you go back and you add the gymnasium, you add the auditorium, and you go back and you renovate the CTE wing. Altogether, with all those phases, it takes about 7 years to build. And that's a long time for a construction project. And so, because of that length of time, we started then looking at some options for building a new building. And let me show you the first of those. There's the back side of the curve. See how that curve wraps around the dining commons in the middle, looks out towards the courtyard. So here's the first of 3 new building options. We're calling it option E. And you can see it actually is hugging very close to the footprint of the existing school building. We're building as close as we can, about 20 feet away from it. And that's so we can really take advantage of and maximize the site between the existing school and the road over here. There's enough room for it, we think. And the program actually lays out very nicely. One thing about the site plan, when you do that, you create a new front onto Rathbun Willard, a very clear front of the building. Parents can drop off in pink here. They can drop off their kids during the morning. Buses drop off behind, and I'll show you how the plan works. So here is the floor plan of that. Entrance in the center at the top, and you can see this plan is basically one long bar building, but it's sort of I call it kind of been cracked. It's called the cracked plan. So it took it and just made a slight crack in it, and that allows it for the central dining common space to open up to the football field behind. So you enter in the center, pass through, and you have a great big space then that opens up to the football and field and the playing fields behind. And you can see it's also a very compact plan because it's a new building. I think it's one of the real benefits of a new building is you can everything can be close together. The classrooms can be close to the CTE spaces, close to the gym. Everything is easily to reach. So unlike this building where you've got to probably 10 minutes from one end to the other, here everything is very close by. I think that's going to be great for the kids and great for going between classrooms and all these other spaces. The gymnasium faces onto the football field and the playing fields. All the CTE spaces are across from it. In fact, this little leg sort of jogs into an actual notch in the existing building, and that becomes the automobile center. And the retail spaces are in front. All the administrative spaces are on the side. And the classrooms, like before, are located above, as you see in the lower plan, again with this idea of a clustering of spaces around breakout spaces in the middle. This is what that would look like from Rathbun Willard. The classroom wing has that kind of idea of a bar that's cracked with the entrance in the center. 1, 2, 3, 4 small learning communities with a library media center in the middle above the entrance. You pass through the entrance. The dining commons is in the center, shown with some skylights in the roof. The gym is on one side, facing onto the football field behind. Auditorium is here. All those big CTE spaces are here. And you can see as you walk around to the back side of the building, the view from the football field looking back at it. Classrooms are here. There's the sort of trapezoidal dining commons that looks out onto the football field. Gymnasium next to it, locker rooms, CTE spaces. Second floor's got program spaces of all kinds of classrooms and administrative offices. We thought it might be nice to have some little courtyards that allow light into that second floor. So you see those on the massing model here as well. I'm going to go quickly to two other options we're considering. Both of them are based on the idea that there was previously the Rathbun Willard Road curved like this and connected. Many years ago that was closed, but the electrical wires are still above the street. If you go out, you can see them. There's also a water line in the street and a gas line in the street, so there's actually an easement that runs along that former street. And both of these options are trying to look at what if we stayed within that easement? Could we save cost by doing that? So that's what we started looking at here. You can see the shape of has changed. So this one is kind of cracked too, this plan, but it's kind of cracked the other way. And so it starts close, again, hugging close to the existing school, but then turns and is sort of perpendicular to the axis of the football field. So a similar kind of idea as the last one, but turned. And you see the floor plans here are similar, with all the orange CTE spaces sort of clustered together. Enter at the top, dining commons here, but now sort of focused on looking out towards the fields. This plan was the smallest, had the smallest footprint because of the site, because we were trying to stay back within that easement, which was here. You can actually see the line of the easement is shown there. So we were trying to build up very, very tight to it, and because it was a tight site, it sort of made us think about, well, maybe some of these things could be a little bit skinnier, and so the classroom wing was made a little bit skinnier in this plan to fit, and because of that, it was longer, and we took the ends of it and we turned them back on top. So instead of long bars like this, it actually sort of turns like that. You can see it in the plan here. And to try something differently, instead of having breakout spaces in the center between the clusters, we thought, well, what if the breakout spaces were two-story spaces, and they faced out onto Rathbun Willard? So a different kind of idea about how you'd organize the plan of the classrooms. And so in this case, breakout space in white, small learning community, breakout space. And this is what that would look like, again, from above. The building is now sort of turning the other way. and it's sort of aligning then with the football field at this end. And it's a little bit dark, but you can see that idea of the four breakout spaces and sort of two-story volumes that would have a real presence on the street. Yes, yes. These are early massing studies. You can see that we're not showing materials yet. It's really just to express the height and the form and how it would fit on the site. But a little bit of a sense about how this would work. And you can see the wings turning back. And as you look at it from the back side then, you see those wings turning back, the academic wings. You see the gymnasium here. There's the dining commons. One thing about this that's kind of nice, the locker rooms fit on the first floor, but because the building footprint was a little bit tight, we moved the fitness room and the weight room, some of the athletic spaces upstairs in front of a terrace, and we thought, well, that would be kind of a nice feature to have those athletic rooms on a terrace facing out onto the field. So a kind of a nice feature about this plan. Okay, and the last one I want to show then is we're calling option K, and option K again stays behind the easement. It sort of follows the arc of the easement, the former street that used to be there. Here you can see it in plan, very sort of similar idea of entering the center. In this case, a big kind of dining commons, which is formed again by the arc and by the gymnasium and by the auditorium. And I think, like the others, again, a very compact plan. And this is what this looks like. Sort of the arc of the building, the arc of the classrooms that then contrast with all of the CTE and other program spaces that are behind it. And from the back side. One thing that about the easement, we went through this exercise of developing these plans based on staying within the easement, but we realized that you still have to really take down the electrical wires. You can't have new electrical wires in front of your brand new high school. And then we realized that if we're gonna build a new high school building up tight to the foundations are going to be very tight to this easement, we're going to have to take out the water lines and the glass lines anyway. They're going to be subject to damage during the construction. So we think that even though they've been designed around the easement, we think that the easement can be moved. We've had discussions with the electrical utility company and the others, and I think the easement will be easy to move. I think these options are still quite valid. I think by leaving the pressure of the easement, I think they can actually relax a little bit and gives us a little more freedom. But I think these options are also still quite valid. Mary Ann.
So at a higher level, what we've heard from Mark is that the renovation projects take approximately 7 years because of the phase-in. We have to do enabling work, we have to relocate duct banks, utility lines, and with the new options, we're looking at about 4.5 years. Sounds like a long schedule, but to give you some statistics, if you look at the repair option, this existing high school is 427,000 square feet. This is actually the size of 2 high schools, typically, in what we're seeing in the schools across the state. And we're also seeing that it's a large enrollment number. And so, as we begin to talk about, relative costs and, why does the project cost as much as it does, we need to keep those things in mind that, you're building a school, whether it's renovated or new, that is twice as big as typical high schools that we see. So the chart behind me is a recent project comparison. We were wondering, when we look at some of the other schools that have been recently built, similar scale and size, we're looking at square footage, we're looking at dollar volume. And so 3 projects, one that Skanska is working on is Winchester High School, 3.5-year renovation. The school is a little less than half the size of this school, and so you can understand why it would be a shorter duration. We also looked at Waltham High School and Somerville High School, because those are schools that have already turned in their pricing, so to speak, their proposals to the Mass School Building Authority. And what we did is we essentially looked at what the square foot cost was to the midpoint of construction for those projects. And given that, we then escalated those costs, square foot costs, to what the midpoint of construction would be for the renovation project, which would be, midpoint would be 3.5 years after an approved project, after a year of design. So we're looking at like 4.5 years out. And then with the new construction, if it's a 4 to 4.5 year project, then a year of design and another 2.5 years beyond that. So what we're doing is really trying to say, where are we with our numbers? Are we high? Are we low? Is it excessive? And so what we did is we were able to look at that relative to renovations and new construction. And what we found is that we were actually, for the options that are provided here, we're a little bit below average in cost. And so folks might say, well, gee, did we make an error? Is there something missing? Well, one of the benefits here with this particular project is that you already have a beautiful football stadium. And so in analyzing this and looking at the other projects, your site costs would be less because of work that's already been done and the investments made to date. So with option 1, the repair option, we looked at the estimated cost as being $196.8 million. And if we look at 60% reimbursement for eligible costs, the effective reimbursement rate for all costs comes out to be about 49%. So what you would see here is that the MSBA grant would provide $95.8 million reimbursement. The estimated city share would be $101 million with an overall cost per square foot of $460. Now, I'm spending more time here on this to let you know that not only did we look at the options, but we had an independent cost estimator look at the options. And so we talked about phasing, we talked about how much space might be available, what did we need in terms of modular classrooms, because you have to be able to work on the space unoccupied for many reasons, including safety and practicality of efficiency in doing the work. And then we took that information and we used the standards. We applied the standards that the Mass School Building Authority would apply about what was reimbursable, what was not. And we were able to, at a very high conceptual level, extrapolate the reimbursement rate. So this can change as the options change and evolve, and we go further along in the process. But this is where we are in terms of the snapshot in time. So that's your repair option. So then if you look at the addition renovation, the estimated project cost was $283.2 million. The estimated grant from the Mass School Building Authority is approximately $137.5 million, and the city share $145.7 million. The next addition and renovation project was $280 million, with a reimbursement from the state for $137 million, and estimated city share of $143 million. What you can see as we go further down the line is that we were able to realize some efficiencies, because we're not going to, if you build new, you're not going to be, going through all this extensive phasing. And with that, you have to look at escalation, construction costs over time, and a longer project always costs more money because you have, construction going on a longer period of time, so there's inefficiencies to that. The option J, 260.4 million, the reimbursement from the state would be 131 million, and the estimated city share would be 129.5 million. And option K, we're looking at 261.6 million, estimated grant from the state 131 million reimbursement, and the city's share approximately 130.5 million. So what we did see in this analysis is that the additions and renovations were well within the reason in comparison to other schools that are, of similar scale. And then we also were able to confirm that for the new options that we were in not just new schools, but we did try to look at Essex Aggie, which is a technical high school, and Cape Cod Regional Technical High. We did have an opportunity to determine with Essex, where it looked like it was a smaller number at $500 a square foot. What we were able to determine is that they actually built around some of the existing spaces that they had up there, and they were not recreating an entire school. They were recreating some new program, and it was the merging of two schools. And the merging of the two schools, the schools were able to remain in place without the additional cost of modular, and so that allowed them to shorten their scheduled duration for construction as well. And just as a point of interest, a classroom is less expensive to build than a science lab, as an example, and vocational spaces are more expensive to build than spaces in a conventional high school. And what we're seeing with the Chapter 74 career and technical spaces, these spaces are really about workforce development, preparing students for emerging technologies and jobs of the future. So because of that, and in concept, they're replicating what you would see in the workplace, where, this concept here is about training students for, graduating from high school and either going to college or going right to work in industry, having a very strong background because they had training that is very similar to the workspace that they would be working in. So we have all of the options here across the top. One of the things we did look at in the analysis was building efficiency. So we looked at, square footage. So for example, with the repair option, not only did we look at building footprint, but we also looked at massing, and we looked at envelope, and we were able to look at where we were able to realize some efficiencies. In general, the estimated reimbursement rate from the Mass School Building Authority is around 49 to 50% across all the options. And also what we realized is in the new options, we were able to create some efficiencies and not have the sprawl of the building, which also allowed us to be more efficient in the gross to net ratio of program space and circulation and all of that. So we would like to hear from you and answer any questions the City Council or School Committee may have.
So, Mary Ann, I think the way that the agenda was set up, and I think the way that would be easiest is to start with the City Council and the School Committee, questions or comments that they may have or we may have. And then when we're done with that, then we'll open it up to the public to ask as many questions as they'd like. Just before we get started, Mike Tyler from the School Committee couldn't be here tonight, but he did ask me just to read a comment that he had because he was disappointed he couldn't make it. And the comment that he wanted me to make to the School Committee and City Council was that with the high school project having finally made the cut with the MSBA, If we don't act now, we could be put to the end of the line, as many other school districts are also requesting funding. So this is an opportunity that we shouldn't pass up. So again, he just wanted me to pass his thoughts on, so he couldn't, since he couldn't be here. That being said, Mr. Cook, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Withers. First, on behalf of the Municipal Council, I want to thank Chairman Withers and the members of the school department for hosting this meeting tonight. It's been very informative, something that we'll have to work together on as not only as elected boards, but also as a city to resolve this ongoing project or problems and call the project that's going to work. I would ask, and I'm not sure who's going to be answering some of these questions, but I would request that the comparison chart that was just up there, if we could get a copy of that for distribution to the municipal councils at a later date, I would appreciate that.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that'd be great. I did have a couple of questions related to some of the different options that were mentioned. Reference was given to the right-of-way for the utilities, and I was wondering on some of the options for the new building, for example, the school would be closer to the Rathbone Willard or further back, closer to the in a couple of cases closer to the utilities. Is there any cost savings by being closer to that utility right away versus back, and would that affect the cost? Do you know?
What we looked at was, we were trying to look at whether it made a difference or not, if we could build the building independent of taking part of the existing building down. And then in addition to that, we also, and that's why you started to see some of the curved shapes, started saying, well, gee, what if we didn't have to relocate utilities, but the utility easements? But what we found is that we would still end up having the wires coming across very close to the front of the building. It would not be the best practices in terms of safety for construction, because we'd be working with booms going around the outside of the building, and certainly there have been accidents and tragedies in the past about working close to wires like that in construction projects. And so in concept, we were able to speak with the utilities. We don't think it's a huge, we thought it was important not to let the relocation of the easement, since it's not a huge cost factor in all of this, drive the design of the building. We wanted it to be truthful, so to speak, to honoring what the educational program goals were and trying to achieve that. And so even though we did have an option where you were right up close against the utilities, it shouldn't be a factor driving the program design.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm interested also in potential related costs. And I realize at this point this is a moving target to quite an extent, but just in terms of, as we consider possible financing and some related matters to that, I have two questions. The first is, if we were to go with a new construction, but obviously in looking at the plan, it's showing the relocated athletic fields. Does this, the cost estimates that were mentioned tonight, does that include the construction of the new athletic fields that would be required?
All of the costs that were given were total project costs that involved everything soup to nuts, so that once the building project was complete, whichever project it is, that's it. That would be what the cost is. And so we tried to give you a reliable, durable number that you could take to the bank, literally, and that at the end of the day, when the project is closed out, hopefully there's a little money left over, or you know, certainly not exceeding that budget. So it's taken into consideration escalation into the future.
Okay. So the fields would be included as part of
Yes.
this cost? Okay.
Yes.
And then related to that, and again, this may not be a question for you, this might be more something for the schools in the future. I know sometimes when there are new schools that are built, there's a tendency to also, there's obviously certain equipment, for example, in an auditorium that would be in there. But in terms of things like tables and desks, things of that nature, and chairs and so forth, is the idea that we would be purchasing new, would we be using these over there? I think that's a cost that's not connected with this at all.
I believe it's a combination of both,
Okay.
and that has to be vetted over time. I
Right,
mean,
exactly.
eventually, whatever option we go with, there's going to have to be an inventory
Right.
of all the equipment, furniture, fixtures in the building. But I will say that the Mass School Building Authority does reimburse $2,400 in total per student for what they call FF&E, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. Certainly there is, I'm sure, equipment in the building that can be utilized and brought over. What we did do in this estimate, even though even though the state reimburses the $2,400, we don't think by any means that it's necessarily a sufficient amount of money, but certainly conceptually, I think it's more important to build the building, get the bones, and if you need to add something later, it's easier to add furniture than it is to add a wing.
Right, absolutely. No, I appreciate you very much providing that type of information at this stage of the process, because that is something that people will be wondering about as we go forward and try and figure out how to finance this project. So I appreciate very much you making mention of that program. Thank you for your answers. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm just going to swing over here so I can see everyone.
Thank you, Marianne, to you and your team for the presentation, for the efforts you've put in. I have a number of questions on a number of different levels, so I'll stick with plan-based questions for now and process-based for now. Early on in the presentation, you mentioned different credits, one of those being energy efficiency and possible improvements with all of these projects. Can you give some details in terms of what those energy efficiencies may be, whether it's electrical fixtures, water efficiency fixtures? What could those include, or have you guys not gotten to that stage yet?
We haven't gone that far, but there is a program called Mass CHIPS and also LEAD, Design Leadership in Environmental Energy Design. And essentially what it is it's a program where we have this checklist where we're looking at usage of water, we're looking at orientation of the building on site. And essentially what we're doing is you're developing a higher performing building, higher performing than what you have. It's easier to achieve in a newer building, or combination than it is necessarily in a renovation, but you're looking at your envelope system, your operating costs, and your life cycle costs. And it's not something we can calculate at this point in time, but we will be looking at that as we move towards a preferred option. But what I can tell you is that the state will, through the Mass School Building Authority, reimburse 2 additional percentage points towards the project for the construction of the project. And 2% of either 100 million or 200 million, you can see where the numbers are going, that it makes it worth trying to achieve those incentive points, because I really do think they pay for themselves over time.
And thank you. And to follow up to President Cook's comment about furniture, I know when the list of categorically non-reimbursable items, I saw athletic equipment listed, and it made me think. I know when Somerset Berkeley had their building built, they were able to incorporate some of their athletic equipment under furniture and fixtures. Is that something that's still a possibility, or is that kind of a quirk project to project, and are there other quirks similar to that?
Well, in 963 CMR, page 42, and it goes on to 2 pages, it talks about ineligible costs. And I can't really speak to what was done creatively on another project per se, but it is something that we would sit down and review with the Mass School Building Authority, and they would categorically let us know whether it's eligible or not. And so we're applying the rationale of the grant program as it's written, and how much wiggle room there is. That's hard to say at this point.
And then the last question I have for now is less of a question, but more of a comment. With the designs, there was mention of the easement of where Rathbun Willard used to be. And with the designs, it looks like there are more fields on the opposite side of the building where they are now, practice soccer fields and everything. And Mr. Larson has pointed out that obviously Rathbun Willard used to connect. Now that the fields would be on this side, I wonder if it's useful for the city to reconnect Rathburn Willard to reduce traffic on Bushy and Ferndale streets that aren't as equipped for the kind of traffic. So that might be something worth considering way down the road. Obviously, still early in the stage for that as well. But
Certainly, we would be willing to look at anything. My understanding was that, I believe it was 1982, that when the change was made here, that one of the considerations was that the idea of children crossing the street to the fields was the thinking behind eliminating the street that
Right.
went between the field and the school.
right. I'll save my others for later. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions, if I may. My first one is, could you please speak to the technology, the educational technology readiness of the new designs?
Could you repeat the question?
Educational technology readiness of the school.
Well, I would say the existing school probably is not where folks would want it. I think going forward, they're in trying to support the educational goals, that there would be consideration of where technology is going, you know, wireless, et cetera, having the spaces not, you know, a lot of schools are moving away from computer labs. They're moving more towards being able to work and set up anywhere within the building, and I think that's something that needs to be developed as part of the program over time, but we're not in that conversation now, but I know it's been discussed in the educational program. Right now, the extent of what we've done is really about massing, supporting the program spaces, but we have not gotten to that level at this point in time.
And Mr. Storrs, the educational plan that the school committee approved, that the new school designs, look to serve, anticipate increased technological capabilities in conformance with the 21st century education. So that would actually be part of a new school or a renovation addition.
So my next question has to do with the gymnasium. So with a school this size, we currently have 2 different gymnasiums for all the different sports programs that we have. I understand the new design is limited to 1. I understand that's part of the reimbursement, what MSBA is willing to reimburse or what they're willing to support. As far as the new designs and the gymnasium facility, can you speak to the size of it? Is that like, a basketball court size, or is it something different than that?
Well, I'm going to invite Joe to speak to this, Joe Milani, and but I do believe that we were looking at about 18,000 square feet.
Can you go to the mic?
I've really been told that my voice isn't loud enough to hear, especially in my office. The gymnasium right now in the design is 18,000 square feet. It's what the maximum the MSBA will allow for reimbursement. It's about twice the size of the gymnasium we have now. The new gymnasium will be subdividable into 4 learning spaces, so that any learning spaces you had in the existing configuration with the big gym and the small gym would be still be able to have in the one large gym you'd have in the new design. The existing gym you have now, the structure and the roof is a little too low. It's about 20 feet off the floor to support MIAA scheduled events. You need 22 feet for a basketball game, 25 feet for a volleyball game, but our new gym would be sizable enough to deal with that. We had looked at saving the gymnasium at some point during the designs extensively, but as it turned out, the additional seismic and structural bracing that were necessary to reutilize that gym would have detracted from the design, and so we decided that it was beneficial for both the MIAA reasons and for the structural reasons to rebuild that gym as a new structure.
Thank you. Just one final question. Was there any thought given to the swimming pool and maintaining that portion of the current facility adjacent to the new designs?
We did We did look at the implications of keeping it in terms of, but not in terms of the new design. Our understanding is that there is a new pool facility available in Attleboro, and what we found is that in trying to work around the pool, that it started creating some inefficiencies in cost, and it's also something that the Mass School Building Authority excludes participation in the design and construction of the pools.
As part of our study, we did hire an auditorium consultant, a specialist in pool design, who went and reviewed the existing equipment in the school, in the pool, and we found that there was about, I think, $1 million or $1.5 million, I forget what the exact number was, of repairs and replacement of equipment that was necessary for the pool to be in current condition. And it was decided that because of the non-reimbursable status of the pool and the cost, that it wasn't cost effective to replace it. If you think about it, at 50% reimbursement, a dollar you spend on the pool to fix it at no reimbursement is worth basically $2 to put towards classroom space and other spaces within the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you for your work on this. I have a couple procedural questions. So when we talked about the overall cost, does that account for project overruns and contingencies?
No overruns. We don't do overruns. But yes, contingency.
Famous last words, and
Yes.
I'd love to believe you in that.
Knock on wood.
All right.
So far.
And then can you walk through how is the bidding process going to work, and are we going to be subject to prevailing wage?
Always subject to prevailing wage, and it's yet to be determined, but certainly there is reimbursement that for this project you'll be grandfathered in, that there's 1% additional reimbursement from the state if you go CM at risk. And the difference between that is, just so folks understand, prior to the Construction Reform Act of 1994, they used to say design, bid, build, and litigate. And now with the opportunity to go CM at risk, you're bringing the construction manager on during the design of the project, where they can work with you with phasing, logistics, constructability reviews, being able to estimate, evaluate, costs with the project, and give real-time feedback to the design team. That's really critical, so that what you're doing in essence is you're designing to a cost model. And so there's benefits to that, and I think the state sees the value because they're offering an additional 1% reimbursement for that. But certainly you could design, bid, build, hopefully never litigate, or you could engage a construction manager, and there's also an additional benefit, which is there's flexibility in bringing a construction manager on board, because we often see with projects that there's an opportunity that if you can start the construction sooner and end sooner, and if you could, take a year off your project because you're not spending that time being linear, saying, okay, we're going to design it, now we're going to bid it. It gives you an opportunity to get an earlier start, and if you even save 1 year in escalation, and let's call it 3%, and that's $3 million per 100 million, all of a sudden you're saying, gee, $6-8 million here. This is something for us to take a look at.
Absolutely. Thank you. Another one, if I may. So with each of these options, can we talk about the life cycle? How long, will the effectiveness of the buildings last, and how nimble are the projects going to be able to change and accommodate with the changing education styles and as education continues to evolve?
Okay, so Joe, I'm going to let you speak to the life cycle costs, and I'm not sure about your second question, if I can answer that.
Well, we talked about how this building throughout the years hasn't been able to keep up with the changes in education and how it evolves. If we could just talk a little bit about how the new buildings are going to be able to keep up with the changes in education.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
In terms of life cycle, not part of this module with MSBA, but part of the next module with MSBA. We do a life cycle cost analysis of all the new designs and compare that to the cost of life cycle cost for the repair. This building itself is basically 50, 60 years old. We would expect that the life cycle that we get out of a new construction would be about that. 50 or 60 years. In terms of flexibility, we have taken steps in the design to try and accommodate as much flexibility as we can. It's difficult to predict, learning styles in the next 50 years. I mean, I went to school and they had open classrooms, which are now subdivided into 15 little classrooms here and there. But we do our best. We have floor spaces that are especially in the first floor, which are set at a certain height to allow for the CTE spaces at an elevated height, higher than a typical floor height would be, to allow the CTE spaces to move about and to be changed over time, so that you're not locked into having all the CTE spaces in one part of the building that has a high ceiling and the rest of them can't be moved. So we thought by creating that sort of a table of a first floor that allowed that flexibility would be a good thing. And in terms of the classroom spaces, the small learning communities are also built around a floor plate that would allow some flexibility. But as with anything, there is a certain cost that it would take to modify things in the future. I'm sure that as we went forward, things could be modified. But we do have quite a large floor plate to deal with that I'm sure that anything could be modified down the road.
Perfect. Thank you. This is very exciting to be at this point right now, so I appreciate all your hard work on this.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate a point that Mr. Delisio just made, that while this is a very serious meeting, this is a very exciting time in the city of Attleboro. The decisions that we make are going to impact not just the children of this community for the next 50 years, but all the residents. So I thank you for making this presentation, and it's an incredible opportunity for us. And it's great to hear that you feel like this is one of the cleanest buildings that you've been in, and it's more, the conditions are more a reflection of the age rather than a lack of maintenance. One thing I wanted to, you were kind enough to answer some questions last evening, but I want to bring back something that you mentioned last night that I thought was important, was about complying with the MSBA caps in terms of reimbursement. So there are caps in terms of what they'll reimburse in terms of fields versus classroom space, overall square footage cost, but also the size of the classrooms. Can you speak to a little bit about how you've tried to maximize our reimbursement rate through the design and not, leading to unreimbursable space?
I'm going to take a crack at answering that, and then I'm going to ask Joe to answer it. But the Mass School Building Authority has this, what they call space summary. It's the guidelines, and it's very prescriptive in terms of it's X amount of square feet per student, and then in terms of class, they look at classroom size. So if you have, if your practice is to have 24 or 25 students on average in a classroom, so we're looking at the number of classrooms, and it's prescriptive in their space summary that talks about how many square feet you can have. So a science classroom, they expect it to be a certain size. They're not looking for it to be bigger, but they'll tell you if you made it smaller than their guidelines. And so we try to take all of that programming and account for it in the space summary, so that then we're saying, okay, we're looking at where is every student every period of the day. They've got to be somewhere, whether it's in a classroom or in the gym or in one of the labs. And so when we account for that with the Mass School Building Authority, they're looking for what they call 85% utilization, which means we know you're not going to have every room filled every period, every hour, every day. But if you can achieve an efficiency of 85% utilization, it gives you flexibility in the building. It allows for when you may have some increases in student population, because that's going to vary year to year. And so by conforming to their requirements, it is really the best way to try and maximize your reimbursement. So for example, we know that for site costs, they'll reimburse up to 8% of the construction value. So if the project was 100 million, and I'm not saying that, but if it was 100 million, for construction, they would reimburse up to 8 million. And so, so then if you got really extravagant on a $100 million project and you decided you wanted to have a sports arena and all of these different things, they're going to say, well, that's fine, you can do that, but we're only going to give you that 8 million. And that other 12 million you've added, that's at your expense. And so, to Joe's point, what we try to do is to keep you within the guidelines. They're not always perfect. They don't have separate guidelines for comprehensive high schools. They don't have separate guidelines for vocational schools. But if we can conform there, and sometimes there's a rationale and an argument to be made about how that a particular space might be needed or might be larger because it supports your educational program or supports the special education population, then you start to say, okay, maybe we can do that. But I think, from our perspective, we know that there's precious few dollars to be wasted, and so we try to maximize the reimbursement for the district. And so when we see, suggestions about, hey, what do you think about the pool? One, we understand that there's a new pool in the community, but two, we're able to say, gee, you're sort of, if you spend that 1.5 on the pool, you've given up $1.5 million the state would have given you money for somewhere else, because ultimately, it's not the total project costs you're going to be looking at. You're going to be looking at what is the cost to Attleboro.
And that answers my question, and just to reiterate, I just thought it was important to stress that we are trying to maximize our reimbursement rate within the context of meeting our educational plan, and that we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible.
Exactly.
No one else wants to. So just a few comments. I'm like possibly some of the folks in the audience. I know I have a significant emotional attachment to this building, and I'm a pretty sentimental guy anyway. So losing this building is painful, but there is nothing rational that can make me defend keeping the building with the maintenance issues that it currently has. I know the repair option is obviously the cheapest option, but doesn't necessarily mean it's the most totally cost-efficient option, given maintenance that would have to happen after the repair, and again, not meeting the educational plan. And it's the plans you've presented clearly are need-based, not desire-based. I think Mr. Sawyer's quote in paper this morning about this being a no-frills project is worth reiterating as well. All of that being said, this is, whatever option we choose, it's a very expensive option that is going to have to be funded by a debt exclusion. And there are some in the community that are concerned that if we're going to bat for some type of a tax increase to pay for educational services, should that be something for the entire district, not for the high school? So I think that's something that we need to consider going forward in this project. Both need to happen. The high school project is a very pressing need, and it's something that, to Mr. Quinn and Mr. Delicio's point, it's something that I'm very excited about happening as soon as possible. But there are other concerns that we as a community, and not just in the schools, there are other financial concerns that we need to consider as well.
Mr. Geddes, if I could just respond to that briefly, because I think it's an important point that I've gotten asked a lot about, as we've been talking about this project, knowing that it's going to be expensive, and I've been asked about it again today. And as Mr. Sawyer alluded to, and as you alluded to, we do have two issues facing the schools right now. The issue we're talking about today, which is the structural issue of the Attleboro High School, and the operational budget concerns that have been much publicized over the past year, both of which need to be addressed, and I think both of which have to be addressed. And to those people who would say what you said, that well, why wouldn't you be addressing the operational concerns? I think the answer is that we are doing what we can to address those. We're continuing to do so. The school administration and the city administration have been meeting to work out a sustainability plan for the operating budget for the Attleboro Public Schools. It's in process. It's been started. We hope to have reports on that before the school committee in the near future. But that's, that's not a concern that we can ignore or people should think we're ignoring. It's something that is being worked on at the same time. But we can't allow that concern to allow us to ignore this very real concern as well.
And just something that I've been reflecting on and looking at the plans over the last day or so, I think it bears mentioning that the operational issue, as you said, came up in a much larger scale in the last year. But the thoughts of replacing this building actually came up 6 years ago, I think. So it's worth mentioning. It's worth mentioning Mayor Dumas actually kind of said we need to be patient about this because 6 years ago this would have been entirely on the city's wallet. So having that patience and foresight to wait on it, I think is obviously benefited us given how much money we could save with all of these projects.
And I think, the other point as to the cost and, taking the step to address the structural problem at the high school is that, that's a real cost that the city is going to have to undertake at some point in the very near future. And so if that's the case, I think we'd be very short-sighted and irresponsible not to take this opportunity when we have the opportunity for the state to reimburse us essentially half of that cost rather than wait 4 years, 5 years till something happens and then there's a $200 million price tag on our doorstep without the state stepping in to help us foot that bill. So I think that's very important to keep in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else have any questions up here, Mr. DeLisio?
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about how construction is going to impact the learning? I know we talked about, we didn't talk about, but if you look at the repair options, we talk about temporary classrooms. Can we talk a little bit about, one, where are those going to be? How's that going to impact the learning of the students? And secondly, similarly, how is that going to impact our sports programs? If we're the construction, if we're going to be building on some of the existing fields, is that going to impact ability to practice at the current location in terms of home games and meets and whatnot?
Under the repair program, I'm not sure if you can hear me, sorry. Under the repair program, we would have to use modular classrooms. It would be somewhat disruptive because you'd be moving, teachers, classes, students in and out of the school. It, would have to develop, which we have not done to this point, develop a very finely detailed phasing plan that would be communicated very well to the teachers, the families, the students. There is an impact if you are building over the fields, for example, whether it be with an addition or total new construction, that you would have to, you certainly couldn't be having practices going on inside of a construction zone. And so there would have to be other facilities and accommodations made. That's not unusual. That becomes really a scheduling element, but whatever would be done would be in conjunction where it's not just, hey, this is our idea about it. It's we would have the impact of the input of the city, of the educational leadership to really try and come up with the best plan that is the least disruptive, because very important to each of the scenarios is how do we keep the school fully operational? How do we not interrupt education? I mean, that is what is supposed to take place here. And so you have, we will meet your long-term educational goals and all of the options, with the exception of the repair option, because it's basically like a maintenance program. But your short-term educational goals are just as important, because if you have a project that's going on 7 years, you're interrupting the education for some students, their entire high school education. And you would have 3 full classes potentially under a 7-year scenario that would go through their entire high school experience in a construction zone.
Thank you. I just wanted to ensure we drove that point home. I think it's very important to, as we look at the options, to think about the impact it's going to have on the students as well as the athletes and the rest of the community. So thank you.
I'd just like to add that under the repair and renovation options, not only will it be a disruption to the learning for 7 straight years, but there will be 3 graduating classes whose entire 4-year high school experience will be disrupted by the project.
Thank you. I think that's an important point.
If I could add too, although we note, and we did do phasing studies to generally move the parts and pieces around to make sure that we could accommodate the program in the school during the construction process. We haven't done it classroom by classroom, as Marianne said. However, it's important to note that in the new scenarios that although the total construction time is about 4.5 years, that the timeline to build the new school itself, which would be built completely outside of the existing school, would not disrupt the existing school at all, except for the fields during the construction period, would only be about 2.5 to 3 years. And so you could move into the new school in about 3 years. The rest of the timeline for that another 1.5 years would be for reconstruction of the fields. Although you'd have disruption and construction ongoing for almost 7 years or more throughout a renovation process, that would be shortened to no disruption, but a construction time of about 3 years for the new process.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm all set, thank you.
Two questions, if I may. The first one has to do with career and technical education. We've been systematically looking to increase our programs over the years, and we've done so. And I see that you have covered all of our existing programs. Can you speak to whether any thought was put into the design for future expansion of career and technical education?
Well, I can answer part of that question, that we do have 4 new CTE programs that are being added in the building program. I almost want to defer to the principal here, Mr. Rooney, because what we've been looking at is, and it's really part of the goals of the city and the school, which is to increase the participation of the percentage in the number of students participating in the CTE programs, because there's reimbursement that goes with that from the state. I believe it's about $4,500 per student. So there's an incentive there for doing that, but there's also a practical part of it, which is to build these spaces that you really would want your utilization of those spaces to go up, and that there are certain spaces that can lend itself to, as with all career and technical schools, that spaces are able to evolve over time, and sometimes some programs are let go and new ones are introduced. But I'm going to let Mr. Rooney speak to this.
Thank you, Marianne. Yes, the 4 programs that we've submitted to add to the current educational program would be cosmetology, dental assisting, robotics, and HVAC. HVAC would dovetail very nicely with our highly successful plumbing program that came into play about 3 years ago. There's a demonstrated strong student interest in cosmetology, dental assisting, and robotics. And in each of the designs, aside from the repair option, obviously, the architects have done a nice job of building in what is commonly referred to as a maker space. We prefer to refer to it as a STEM space, where various CTE programs could come together, collaborate, or our math and science programs would be able to come together with certain CTE programs and have a showcase space for those products.
And thank you. My second question has to do with student and faculty parking during the construction. Could you speak to that, please?
If I could add just to the previous question, we designed to the space use summary, effectively the program spaces within the building. We don't add growth space in the building simply because it's non-reimbursable. But we do, as a matter of course, design for future growth, because that student population that uses the basis of design by the MSBA is incorporating future growth of the school. It's higher than the established current population of the school. And so by designing to that future higher population, we are in fact building in some ability for future growth.
Thank you.
Just
So again, the second question had to do with student and faculty parking during the construction, since a lot of the space that's going to be utilized for the new designs is existing parking. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, we would have to accommodate that in the logistics plan. I mean, it would be addressed.
We've done some, we have done, as well as I mentioned before, the phasing plans to determine the length of time it would take to build a building. We've also done, with cooperation with Skanska, layouts plans, generally looking at where locations of temporary classrooms would be, temporary parking would be, locations of temporary fields if we had to put them in, and how that would affect the overall shuffling of the tiles, so to speak, when you get through construction. But it has been looked at, but again, this is very conceptual design at this point. When we get further down the road into the schematic design, that becomes much finer detailed.
Thank you.
It's interesting to hear about the robotics program and the STEM or makerspace, particularly for those of you who attended the Most Likely to Succeed movie and providing space for that hands-on project-based learning. And to dovetail off of what Superintendent Sawyer said earlier about automation, I think that's another drawback to the repair-only possibility, because you wouldn't have necessarily that space for robotics. But one of the other questions that I have with a repair-only is, in your experience, when you repair buildings of this age, how does their life cycle typically compare to new construction? I guess, and a bigger question, does repairing this building increase the likelihood that we're back sooner for future repairs or new construction in the future?
Okay. Even though you would, in essence, be doing what would be considered like maintenance and repairs to the building, I don't think you would end up with a 50-year solution.
So a repair is less likely to have the same
The
longevity.
repair really doesn't take into consideration any of the educational goals. Your spaces are as they are. The adjacencies may not be ideal. The current configuration might not allow for interdisciplinary learning. Your spaces are pretty much, you're locked into what you have. You're not making structural changes to the building. And so even though you're sort of addressing it in terms of life safety, or a better term for that would be bringing it up to code, you're not really enhancing the benefit to the educational program any more than what you have right now.
Thank you.
I think it's important also to note that the space use summary we have for the needs of the school as part of the new construction is larger than the size of the school that you currently have. It's impossible to fit the space use summary that we have into the existing school, and so the sacrifices would have to be made for the desired programs that you want to provide to the students in the future if you were to simply repair the school. And there's a distinction that I think Mary was trying to make, is that there's a real distinction between renovation and repair. The costs and the summaries that we did for the repair program is simply to provide code-required repairs. It doesn't repair specifically all the mechanical systems in the building. It doesn't repair all the other systems in the building that may fail in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road just from age, because typically the repair program is only for code-required repairs. So we're talking about structural repairs that are aligned with seismic. We're talking about acoustical repairs for classrooms. We're talking about accessibility repairs for different handicap accessibility throughout the school. We're talking about all kinds of things that do with fire protection. Anything that has to do with code repairs is addressed in the building, but it's not necessarily sanding the stage and sprucing up the school to make it new. That isn't part of the repair program.
So just to repeat that, there's very limited to no cosmetic repairs built into that, but okay.
That's correct. The only cosmetic repair would be is we have to open a wall to get to wiring, if we have to move a wall because of the structural need, things like that. But as Marianne said, we don't move the walls around to accommodate the educational program. We don't change the sizes of rooms to accommodate the classes or the things they're going to be doing in the future. It's really just a repair to make it code compliant and safe. There's nothing in there that has to do with cosmetics or renovation.
Thank you.
So just to specific follow-up on Mr. Quinn's question, could you give a specific life expectancy of the repair option? Would we, are you thinking it would only be 25 years, maybe a little less, maybe a little more?
I mean, if you did nothing, this building would probably be here after we're gone, right? It's a very solid building. The question is whether or not the systems within the building are able to be sustained, and whether or not the school itself can provide the programs that you need for your kids. The building itself will be here. Whether or not we can repair things and make them last another 50 years really depends on what we repair. And as I said, code-required repairs vary much differently from renovation repairs. You're going to see things that aren't repaired as part of the code repairs that fail in 5 years. That's how it's going to happen. We will replace the exterior shell of the building, replacing the windows and replacing the brick. We'll replace what parts of the roof that need to be replaced when we put into mechanical systems, or replace the mechanical systems that don't comply with the energy code, things like that. But there are certain things in the building that won't get touched, and those things will continue to require increased maintenance just because of their age.
And so in the 15 years that we would be paying off the repair, 15 or so years we'd be paying off the repair with the debt exclusion, we're paying a higher maintenance rate than we would for a new building, and we'd be back here looking for more significant repairs much sooner after we pay it off.
There will be ongoing maintenance repairs that will be on the city's cost going forward if you do the repair option, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. DeLucia?
This is an awful lot to digest, and this is with us who have part of the presentation here. I worry about the folks who aren't able to make it tonight. Will part of this presentation or any variation of this presentation be made available for the public?
Yes, typically when we have a presentation, we turn it over to the school building committee in the city, and they'll be able to post it. I know the city is in the process of updating their website, and I'm not sure about the exact date, but we anticipate that that should be coming online soon. I would have to defer to the city on that question.
Terrific, thank you.
Mrs. Braga?
So what Mr. Rudy just said, so everyone can hear it, it'll be on the YouTube ACS channel as well if anyone wants to rewatch it. I'm sure it'll be up and running again shortly. Just to,
I'm
sorry.
speaking more specifically to the deck, the PowerPoint presentation, so people can see the stats, the numbers, including ourselves. So thank you, Sally.
They just couldn't hear him from over there. Again, to follow up, I get a lot of questions with regards to just people who are insistent that, well, why can't we just fix the windows and let's fix the roof? And thank you, Mr. Withers, for letting me borrow this giant one because I can't see very well on the little guy. But when you look at that, for the repair only, the city is actually on the hook for an extra $5 million compared to what our reimbursements would be. And as you go down the line between the two renovations actually have a higher cost per square footage than the brand new ones, the three other options. So it's important for people to see, I appreciate the efforts of Skanska for trying to get us the biggest bang for our buck, because I really think that that's what you're trying to do. And so I don't like to minimize it by saying putting a Band-Aid on it, but really, it's just a really super duper good Band-Aid that lasts 25 years, but actually ends us costing, over the scheme of things, actually costs more than any of our other plans. So I just wanted to hop on that with you guys. It's fascinating to watch all of this. Thank you.
So at this time, we're happy to entertain any questions from members of the audience. Superintendent Sawyer has come to the front to facilitate that. We would ask that with any questions, you come down to the microphone so that everyone can hear you, and also the questions can be picked up on the AACS and online video. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or come forward. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you. As a parent, I appreciate all this information. Right off the bat, I would like to address Mr. Getty's concern about the emotional impact of perhaps losing this building. The Blue Pride Ambassadors Club would be more than happy to auction off parts of the building to you at our Palooza or any other time.
I've already started
during
the
the year.
savings account.
I'm sure Mr. Rooney would appreciate and help me do that as well.
I've already walked around the building to find out what I'm going to bid on.
Okay,
Don't
you
worry.
made little marks? Okay, so let me know, just write them down for me, we'll work on that. I realize that this is kind of the high end in construction. I'm looking particularly at you as the architect, but are you including things potentially like solar panels, sustainability? I love the idea of, gardens on the roof. I realize that those are costs, but does that come into part of the planning as you get closer to the actual building? So yes, I'm getting a yes. Okay. Okay, good. At one of the other meetings that I attended, Marianne, you made a comment about the ineligible expenses that some of the other schools that you were somewhat comparing us to were putting into place. Somerville, I believe, was one of the examples that they had made choices to put in some ineligible expenses. Can you address what some of them might be? Like, are there things that we might consider that are not reimbursable, but that would really make our school the better school for those next 50 years?
Yes, first of all, I don't want to get myself in trouble with Somerville because I really don't know what their program, but yeah, some of the other communities do choose to spend more money deliberately, more than what would be reimbursed. And it's a choice. It's a community choice. Also, it may be because it might be a wealthier community, et cetera. I mean, they may choose to say, no, we know we're not going to get reimbursement for a field house, but we want the field house, the bleachers, we want, saunas, the whole thing. And I'm not trying to be flippant here when I say that, but it's a community choice, because some communities look at their schools and they build it to be not just a school, but almost like a community center as well. So I think at this point, we're at a very conceptual level. We're trying to be mindful about what we think maybe the financial appetite, but all we can do is provide information so that folks can make an informed decision. It really doesn't matter what my opinion is or the architect's opinion. It really, you folks are closest to it, that you really have to think about, what you want to have happen here with your community and with your schools, because it is an investment, and it's an investment by the state. And I think one thing to remember is that there's 1,850 schools in the state, public schools, and you were fortunate to be one of 26 that were invited into a core program, and the other schools were not. And so, and it's based on need. So it tells me that your time has come to do something, and it also has to be something that the community can afford.
If I could just briefly add to that, in speaking with other superintendents across the Commonwealth, I'm always, I feel bad when I hear others talking about how they have been waiting for years and years for the opportunity to replace a building that they have. And to know that we've been able to get into this position as quickly as we have is an opportunity that, based on that experience, I feel strongly that we should not pass up. Did you have an important? Other questions? If you want to come on up and ask a question, we're happy to try to answer. Come on down.
Hi, I'm Robert Gutt. I own 2 properties in the city, so my taxes are going to be doubled soon, I'm sure, in some way, shape, or form. I do have 2 questions for everybody involved, and they're totally not related to each other, so I apologize for their disjointness. Now, we've talked before, I asked questions before, where there was no room for growth as far as building the building actually bigger to accommodate more students. I want to say roughly 3 years ago, the high school was listed at 1,750, give or take, for student capacity. and how many students were enrolled in the high school. Just looking at the plans, just perusing through them without my glasses, it looked like there were roughly 60, maybe to 70 classrooms. Okay, so if there's only 60 classrooms, the size of the classrooms themselves, what would be the capacity or the average maximum capacity for each classroom? Okay, so it's 60 classrooms and 24 students.
Not all of them are accommodated at the same time. There's a formula in this they give you to determine in this picture something how many classrooms you have in student populations. You do have some current classrooms, as Marianne said, it's all calculated based on the 85% occupancy rate.
If I could, just for clarification, he's asking about classrooms. Are you answering in terms of, are you also, in your answer, including science labs, CTE labs as well? Okay, so.
No. There are also 16 science labs. There are several rooms that are dedicated to special education. And then there are also rooms that are classroom spaces related to the CTE programs that are so closer to 85 to 90 academic spaces that would be used during the day. Somewhere around there.
Okay.
And as we're looking to double the number of students that are in our CTE programs, that means more students in those shops during the day, which means that they're not in.
Thank you, that completely answers the question. Secondly, let's just say that we're going with a non-repair and it's going to either be an addition, reno, or brand new building. For that assumption, if it's a addition or renovation combination, would there be a demolition of the parts of the building that are no longer in use? And also, what steps are in line for protecting Capron Zoo and the animals in Capron Zoo that the community goes to see on a very regular basis?
I'll bring in the thing. With any construction project, we have specific requirements for the general contractors or the CMs for both indoor air quality and external air quality. We regulate based on our specifications in the contract what kind of dust can be created, what kind of demolition can be created, and when that can happen. Because of the phasing that would be necessary when you do a renovation add project, the scope and the extent of each part of the renovations and demolitions would be carefully monitored and scheduled with the CM to make sure they don't disrupt as many students as we possibly can. The demolition of the existing school that was not being used as part of any renovated space, leftover space actually from the new construction space that we showed on the plans, would be demolished completely to make space for fields and other parts of the building we need, like parking lots and stuff like that. If you have leftover space from an original building that isn't being used for anything at all and it's renovated, it's non-reimbursable space because it's beyond the extent of the space use summary, right?
Well, as I said, the only switch you can do with controlling the contract is you control dust that's generated on the site through the way that trucks come in and out of the building. There will be noise in any construction project that will disrupt students in the renovation project, and it will disrupt the locality around the school. The microphone? I don't have a microphone.
Because you gave it up. As I said, there are requirements that will be in our specifications and in the contract that will require the contractor to control pollution and by sound and dust. Oops.
Yeah, let me just answer it this way. If the animals have something to worry about, I'll be a little bit worried about the kids. I mean, they'll be a lot closer. So if we, I certainly care about the animals too, but the kids will be closer, so therefore we're going to make sure that they're safe, and that should take care of the animals in kind. Is that good enough, Joe? No? You had more of a zoo contingency that I didn't know about? Okay. Please, come on up.
Was the presentation that was made today a result of competitive bid?
There is no bidding going on at all. They're estimates, they're budgets. We're looking at conceptual options. They're strictly square foot costs. And then we take into consideration phasing, schedule, modular classrooms, et cetera. And then we look for the total project cost. So what we're doing right now is budgeting conceptually what we believe the total project cost would be. It's not a bid at all. That will come at a different point in time when the building is actually, one option is selected, it's designed, and it's bid competitively.
I was wondering how you were selected. That's the gist of my question. In other words, the presentation you made, I was asking, was that as a result of a competitive bid that you were selected to do that presentation?
Let me answer that. I'm Jack Jacoby. I am the vice chair of the school building committee, been the chair of the municipal building commission for 25 years or so. We held an open competition last spring to hire the owner's project manager. That choice that we made had to be then approved by the state, which they did. We then, with their advice, held an open competition to hire the architect. And again, after holding that open competition with submissions, shortlisting, interviews, we then made the choice for Castle Blues, and the state also endorsed that for us. So it was an open competition to get our project team chosen.
Was selected through competition.
Yes, and let me be clear, it's not price competition. It is quality competition that is mandated by state law. But that's mandated by state law, and we followed state law on all occasions.
And the assessment of the costs, I think you addressed that in a way, Marianne. What you're presenting in terms of the cost in the program is what your current estimate is to build, but it has not been let.
It's for total project cost. It's not just the cost to build, it's the cost of furniture, fixture, it's everything. And it was based on estimates put together by an independent cost estimator that was able to sit down with the team and review the drawings, the square foot costs were put together. I mean, it's very conceptual at this point. Square foot costs were put together, and then we added a factor for the phasing and modulars and things like that, and an assessment of cost for the duration of the project, the schedule as well.
So when the proposal is selected, whether it's new or some variation, it will then go out to bid. Now, when is it?
Perhaps you're all wondering, where do we go from here? And maybe this is the time to answer that question. What the school building committee has identified these 6 things that you saw tonight, 3 new, 2 renos, and 1 repair. And we will be voting on March 15th to, unless something dramatic changes in the next 2 weeks, to submit those to the state. The state will then review those and tell us if we're on the right track, and if so, give us the go-ahead to reduce them down to 1 option. By December of this year, we will have chosen our choice, the 1 option, whether it's option E or B or whichever one, and we will choose that. It will then go back to the state, and if the state then accepts us further into the program, they will execute a contract with us and authorize us to take the next step. The next step would be to have a vote of this community on a debt exclusion, which would be taking place about a year from now. be a ballot question? There would be a ballot question. There would be a special election, and this community would have to vote as to whether to do a debt exclusion. I know from my conversations with the mayor and council that we simply could not afford the debt service out of our current budget. So therefore, the only way to go forward is with a debt exclusion. So that would take place about a year from now. If that passes, we would then be authorized by the state to spend about another year further defining option we've chosen and get it to the point where we have biddable documents. We would then put that out to bid somewhere around the spring of 2019. And if we chose a new option, the kids might be in the school in 2022. If we chose one of the other options, it might be a little farther along the line than that. But that is where we're going. Obviously, there are checkpoints along the way. The state has to approve each step, and the municipal council has to vote to put this on the ballot. You all will have your chance to vote on it. The school committee will also have its input into that, and if we come together as a community and decide to do this, then our students will be somewhere in the 2022 range in a facility that, frankly, they talk about 50 years. In my opinion, we're designing for 75. This project will need to last us for the rest of this century. And we are going to do everything we can as a school building committee to make sure that the choices we've made are good choices, that they're sustainable choices. And one of the things that's been alluded to here, we are going to be looking at the life cycle costs for whatever option we choose. We want to make sure that this building is efficient to operate and provides relief for the school budget rather than extra expense for the school budget.
One that you just made, that was one of the things that didn't come out. That was one of the things that didn't come out in the presentation. What was the operating costs of each of the alternatives for the city?
We don't know that yet. We do know that there will be cost savings because we have single glaze windows and no thermal breaks in the walls in this building. There's a lot of heat that goes out of this building to the great outdoors. We also have a great maintenance staff, but they're fixing things all the time. In a brand new building or in the addition, they certainly wouldn't be doing that. So we are looking at providing budgetary relief starting in 2022 or 23 that will help the school department's budget. I think it's more important to hire teachers than to heat the great outdoors. I think you probably would agree with me on that. So that's where we're going. We also, in the next few months, are going to start looking at what it is going to actually cost any particular homeowner. One of the things we have to look at is, okay, if we're, example, borrowing $130 million, what does that mean to you and what does that mean to me? How many dollars per month or per year is it going to cost us? How long a period of time is that going to last? So we have a lot of work to do, a tremendous amount of work to do. We have work to do on laying out the site and making sure that the parking areas and the ball fields surrounding the building are paid attention to. We have to make sure that the building is constructed in a very efficient manner, but we also have to come up with reliable costs so that you can understand what it means to you. And that's what we're going to spend the next 6 months doing.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Please, come on up.
Mine is less of a question than it's comments because unfortunately I moved here in 1998. I prayed all along that the high school would be looked at and done way before now. My daughters currently are going to be graduating in 2018 and 2021. I've been coming here for dance recitals. I walked around this whole building, and I can definitely say that it is in sad shape. There are lockers that are ripped off. There are bathrooms that are in disrepair. I can't say from a physical standpoint, I've been proud to send my daughter here every day for the last 3 years. I am very happy for the principal, for the staff, for the faculty, for the people who do clean this building, because in that way, I'm very proud to be, you know, a member of this community. But in saying that, I do have to say, in looking over the plans, I really am hoping that you will build a new school. I can't imagine, my daughter is going to be here during that construction period. She is going to miss out. She's a soccer player. She's going to miss out on some of the fields to practice on. But I don't want to see her coming to school every day, listening. I mean, she's going to have to listen to the construction regardless, but to have to walk through the halls while construction is going on, either by doing a patchwork job, which doesn't sound like the viable option, or by, even though the new addition, doing the renovation in the front looks like a nice plan, I really do think that for the current students that are not going to benefit this school at all, that they deserve to have a new school put next to it. And I am happy to see that the future generation at Attleboro, you know, will benefit from a brand new school. I also have to emphasize that even though we will have to, if we do have a Proposition 2.5 override, we'll have to pay in to building this new school, that it should benefit our property values, because most people who move to a community, one of the first things they look at is what are our schools? What are the facilities? You know, are they reputable? And that in the long run will benefit our house values. And that's something a lot of people don't think about, but that, you know, in the long run, I think we will benefit from the costs that we put into, you know, building a new school. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anybody else like to come up and ask a question? All right, Chairman.
Oh, we have one more.
I'm sorry.
Just in the nick of time.
Good evening. You spoke somewhat to the life cycle span. I'm looking at the far end of this thing. Mr. Jacoby just mentioned 75 years out. I'm looking at the idea of what happens 50 years out and you want to renovate what you're about to build, assuming that's what we're going to do. We're going to build. Are we designing for the idea of a renovation in 50 years? What are our construction practices of the day that carry us 50 years and be able to renovate in 50 years and not have to go through this? That's question number one. And also, are we designing the idea of potential for expansion in the future, something that we can't foresee at this time, whether it be go up, expand out. We have factories in the city that had been built, small factories that they put curtain walls on the back end of the building so that they could expand out. Are we looking at something like that in this particular case?
Let me answer a part of your question. The 1,725 student limit is something that the state imposes on us. It's not something we have a choice about. That is based on their demographic studies and their prediction as to the future population of Attleboro. But there are prices that you pay for getting the state to pay for half of the project. One of them is that you design to the level that they impose upon you. In terms of the other things that you're asking about flexibility and what would happen in 50 years, my ability to foresee the future is somewhat limited, so I'm going to give it to Joe.
Crystal ball notwithstanding, we can't predict the future either. There are limitations as to what we can do. We cannot build the entire building out of curtain wall. The energy code just doesn't allow it. You can't get enough of a thermal value out of a curtain wall to support that. But we do plan for the ability to have future expansions. we design the buildings so that those can happen down the road. We're at the first half of conceptual design. We haven't finished conceptual design. That's coming in Module 3B. So we're at the very beginning of conceptual design, and we certainly will take that into consideration as we go forward. But we always look at the ability of schools to expand down the road as need would be. Yes. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the most economical, most efficient way to build buildings today, skeletal steel frame, especially for a four-story building. We are always looking to be cost-effective, efficient with our design. We're not building, an extravagant school here. Compared to, we have 50% reimbursement coming back from the state, hopefully. You don't look at it like we're getting 50% back on a mink coat. We're getting 50% back on a wool coat. We're building a very utilitarian building here and being very conservative in our design, not to hasten our design partner, but we always look at the ability to make the school more efficient and to be cost effective. There's no reason that we would be building in things that were unnecessary, but we will look towards future expansion. The typical construction we use in the building is a skeletal steel frame with steel deck and concrete slab floors. Original school in 1960 was built with a concrete pan construction, which varies from 16 to 26 inches thick, which is one of the reasons that that wing is impossible to reclaim now. There's just not enough room between the underside of that thick concrete slab, and the ceiling to put ductwork and sprinkler piping into, and so that's the death knell for that particular part of the building. There's no way to renovate it. We try and build in enough flexibility in the space we have between the structure and the ceiling to allow us to have maximum flexibility for ductwork and growth in the future. But beyond that, the typical construction of this building is typical for any school. Brick veneer on steel stud backup, concrete block walls for durability where we can, that sort of thing. Always looking for durability, sustainability, and utilitarianism in the building.
One of the other things I was looking at, some of the plans carry over into your parking lot, into the ball field. I know that you folks spend a lot of time with people coming in here, engineers taking a look at the site in its entirety, doing some core samples, and I'm aware of, on two fronts, the conditions of the property out here that encompasses the baseball field, for one. I know from personally working on it for several years that it continually sinks. I also know that we have high groundwater in this area. I happen to take care of the white elephant referred to as a swimming pool, and there's 18 inches of concrete floor that goes underneath that pool and the machine room that I deal with. It was originally called out as, I believe, 12 inches, but they had so much trouble with the water coming up that they had to put the additional concrete into it to keep basically the building from popping out of the ground. So I'm assuming that the plan would be to go on grade construction here. Please, nothing below grade. Okay. Where are you looking, or what are you looking to do as far as mechanicals? I realize it's getting a little more technical. We're still in the so-called design,
We do have mechanical engineers that are putting together our studies. As part of our study, we do have mechanical engineers that review and provide us with narratives and some basic conceptual designs for systems. Typically, we have rooftop units for air circulation ducted throughout the building. That relieves us of having the same problem you have in the building now, where you have ductwork under the slab that you can't access, piping under the slab that you can't access. We try to put stuff where it's accessible and make it most flexible. So we have rooftop units for air circulation and air conditioning. I'm not sure what else. We don't have any unit ventilators in the building. Unit ventilators are a no-no. We don't want to put those in any of the classrooms. It frees up not only not having that headache down the road, but it also frees up the exterior wall of the classrooms for storage space used for students, stuff like that. Windows, light, stuff like that. But we don't have any unit ventilators in the building at all. It'll all be done through rooftop units and VIV boxes.
One of the things that I noticed on your plans is they all call out for another auditorium. But it doesn't say anything as far as size. And we got a pretty good sized auditorium sitting here, and a lot of people talk about it all the time. It doesn't have air conditioning. But anyways, what's the size on the new auditorium that you'll be putting in place?
There are limitations from the MSBA, like any other room in the building, what they allow for an auditorium. I believe it's 2/3 of the population of the school. So we have, that's a cap. I think we're sizing the new auditorium for actually for half, I think. In discussions with the school, the use of the auditorium in the class sizes they need to be in the auditorium at any one time. We try to be efficient and cost effective in designing it for the need, but not being extravagant in the size. Yeah, exactly. 875. I think it's between 875 and 900 students or people in the auditorium. And it will be designed, unlike this auditorium, to be handicap accessible. One of the problems with this auditorium is that if we were to renovate the building, and part of the problem, one of the high costs in the repair program, is that this room would basically be gutted down to the dirt and have to be rebuilt to be handicap accessible, to be efficient with mechanical systems and stuff like that. This is no way to save the room as it sits right now. It will be a very costly issue to do. Yep.
All right, I blew this the last time.
Unfortunately, today we have 34 children or students per room, and I think you stated that there was that? 33. You stated that 24 students were going to be per room. Is the plan going to be flexible enough to accommodate 34? I mean, I don't want that, but what happens if you need to put 34 people?
Well, the classrooms are all basically the same size. The classrooms are all 850 square feet except for the science labs. There is some flexibility with operable partitions we have between some of the larger spaces and the corridor spaces. We have small seminar spaces that occur in the corridors. As we said, we have the learning communities with surrounding some open spaces that we use for congregation students and whatnot. So having that flexibility to have open spaces where kids can get together with teachers and do specific projects within the pods or small learning communities will help us with flexibility down the road. We can certainly build in operable additions within classrooms to allow us to have, and those go a long way. When I was in school, operable additions were not going to be a price paper, but now a lot of them are rated for the same preschool value as a regular wall. So we can certainly build in some flexibility to classrooms up and take multiple use of it.
Joe, am I mistaken that the MSBA guidelines that are guiding the design currently are actually call for a larger classroom than is the the usual classroom size in like say A building?
The classrooms you have now run between 720 and 760 square feet, typically for the building. 850 square feet is the minimum size.
So
More square feet.
what he's calling 24 is bigger than we're cramming 33 into, and I certainly don't wish to accept the 33 and start designing buildings for them. Come on up.
One thing I know about the school now is that going back to the lockers are like laser thin. I mean, you can't fit books in there, you can't fit backpack. The kids in general don't even use them. And I am just curious if with the new school design, you'll make lockers, assuming you make them, because like I said, right now they lug around backpacks. I'm hoping with this, if you do wind up going with a newer school with a smaller footprint, that is taken into consideration to make lockers that are actually functional as opposed to, you know, like I said, what they are now.
I have a comment on that, if it's okay. You're absolutely right. Very few students use the current lockers we have. They're very thin. I guess there wasn't as much knowledge in the books back in the 60s and 70s. I'm not sure. But in all seriousness, we are moving to much more digital learning. As Libby so astutely wove into her question earlier to Mr. Geddes, the Blue Pride Ambassadors Club and the district have supported us to have a lot more technology in the building through our Chromebook carts, and so a lot of the books that we're using, a lot of the resources we're using are now digital. So students are carrying fewer books. I know you've got, you know, two in the system. I had one that graduated in 2015, and realistically, budget constraints have forced us to buy fewer textbooks through the year. So now we have classroom sets that the students use when they're in that particular classroom, and then they stay there for B block, they stay there for C block. So as you know, we get further into the process, we will certainly assess what the most appropriate need for lockers would be. But you know, I'm pretty confident that it would be more functional than the ones that we have now. We are phasing out the lockers to a great extent. I mean, that's, you know, I foresee that, you know, if this comes to fruition, that there would be significantly proportionate less in terms of locker space for our students.
Yeah. And which is why they may be up for auction at the Blue Pride Ambassador fundraiser in a few years.
Mr. Sawyer, may I? Okay. I have to say I'm a very biased host here tonight, not only as an employee, as the principal of the high school, but also as a parent of a 2015 graduate and a parent of a 2021 graduate. And obviously, since I have kids here, I'm a resident as well. I just want to extend my deep appreciation to both of your honorable bodies for this support. The principals, my colleagues, the other administrators that are here very late tonight. We had a lot of our Attleboro High School staff who was here earlier, and some who are still hanging with us tonight. The School Building Commission has been a phenomenal organization to be able to work with, and without the vision of our central office staff, the designs that we have that you saw tonight for these phenomenal learning spaces would not be in place. I am blessed to be a part of this school community. We are taking this facility and producing the types of students that are going to Princeton, they're going to Bristol Community College, they are in the Bridgewater State ICE program, they are our soldiers, they are the people who are repairing our cars, and engineers that are designing prosthetic devices and all those types of things. The type of student that we are producing here is first class, top notch. And our teachers are doing a fantastic job of making that a reality with very difficult conditions. Some of the project-based learning that we are already doing that is woven into these designs has been rewarded by the visioning team. Dr. Frank Locker, the leader of the visioning team, has invited several of our teachers to present at a conference in October on project-based learning. We don't have spaces that even really are that conducive to that type of project-based learning. And I could go on all night about the CTE programs, the value-added learning that our students are receiving through those programs. Carla's sitting here right on the front row. Her son was a National Merit Commended Scholar with a phenomenal educational profile, and he was a CTE student as well. So, you know, as things are going to start to develop in terms of the costs of this particular project, you know, I know that there will be a lot of data that will come out about the, you know, the reimbursement for CTE students, and the superintendent's vision as well as my vision to have, you know, upwards of 50% of our graduating classes enrolled in CTE. It is just a very exciting process to be a part of, and you know, my fingers are certainly crossed that you know, we'll be able to bring this to fruition. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
I just want to thank everyone again for coming, and those of you still here, thank you. I know it's a late night, it's been a long night. Thank you to President Cook and the City Council. Thank you to the members of the school committee as well for coming, as well as all of our other guests tonight. There will be a similar presentation as to this one on March 15th, which is a Wednesday night. My date correct? Yeah, the 15th. It won't be a joint meeting of the school committee and the city council, but we'll have similar, the design options will be presented. The community will have an opportunity to ask questions. The idea, again, being we wanted to do it on different nights of the week in case there are people who couldn't make it on a Thursday, that on the 15th, on a Wednesday, they would be able to make it. In addition, as Mary Ann alluded to, we're in the process of, the city's in the process of updating their website, at which time all this information will be made available. That being said, in the meantime, I'm sure our central office administration can get this information out to the public while we're waiting on that to happen. But again, I wanted to thank everyone for coming. It'll be a busy few months and upcoming year, so we look forward to the continued discussion. All that being said, this is an official meeting, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you again.